All right, folks, strap in. Today, we're taking a deep dive into something truly bizarre. Zulu shamanism. And you guessed it, extraterrestrials.
A fascinating intersection, isn't it? Ancient traditions meeting what we'd consider modern sci-fi.
It really is. And our guide through this strange world, Credo Mutwa, a Zulu shaman and artist. He claimed to have been abducted by, well, let's just call them visitors.
Mutwa's story, whether you believe it or not, certainly taps into something deep within us. That fascination with the unknown, with forces beyond our understanding.
No doubt about that. So let's start with Mutwa's description of Earth before these visitors arrived. He paints a picture of constant drizzle, a dim sun, enormous trees.
Ah, yes, a primordial Earth.
Exactly, and the humans, androgynous, communicating telepathically with each other and with nature.
It's interesting how this golden age concept pops up in so many mythologies, always followed by a downfall, of course. Makes you wonder, did we really evolve or did we lose something along the way?
Trade-offs, maybe. But anyway, back to Mutwa's story. Who crashes this idyllic party? The Chitauri. Picture a massive metallic spacecraft descending from the sky.
Some shaped like giant bows, others like cylindrical transport ships.
Straight out of a sci-fi movie.
The Chitauri fit the mold of the classic creator-god figure we see in many mythologies. Think the Anunnaki from Sumerian myth. Powerful beings, advanced technology, often manipulating humanity.
Oh yeah, these guys are not here for a friendly visit. And their appearance, let's just say it's straight out of central casting for sci-fi villains. Reptilian humanoids, some with 3 fingers, others with 6. Horns signifying their rank. And of course, those yellow eyes with slit pupils.
Can't forget those. The reptilian imagery, especially the serpent, is so deeply rooted in mythology, knowledge, temptation, primal chaos. A powerful archetype that speaks to something deep within us.
Definitely unsettling. And then there's their society, a eusocial structure, like ants or bees. Roles predetermined genetically, warrior, worker, ruler, no room for individual aspirations.
Makes you think, doesn't it? What happens to free will in a society like that? We see echoes of this, perhaps, in our own history, in those rigid systems like caste systems.
True, true. So these Chitauris, they decide to upgrade humanity. And by upgrade, I mean seriously mess with us. First, they separated the sexes.
Using chambers emitting colored light, green for female, red for male. Quite a dramatic way to introduce sexual dimorphism.
It does have that Garden of Eden vibe, doesn't it? Loss of innocence and all that.
Precisely. And then comes the gift of language. Seems like a good thing, right?
You'd think so. But according to Mutwa, it backfired spectacularly. Communication breakdowns, misunderstandings, conflict.
A classic case of good intentions gone wrong, or perhaps a deliberate act of manipulation.
Why all the trouble? What were they after? Well, Mutwa believed it was one thing, gold.
Not for its monetary value, though.
Nope. He claimed they needed it for their health and technology.
Ironic, isn't it? We humans have been obsessed with gold for millennia. What if our fascination stems from some subconscious imprint left by these extraterrestrial visitors?
Mind-blowing.
Hmm.
Now, where did they keep all this gold? Underground, of course. Massive subterranean cities beneath mountains.
The underworld. The hidden realm. Another recurring theme in mythology, isn't it? Secret knowledge. Forbidden power.
Okay, ready for the main event. Mutwa's abduction. He's out in the bush looking for herbs. Suddenly, this blue mist engulfs him, freezing cold despite the sunny day. Next thing he knows, he's in a metallic tunnel, lying on a platform like a surgical table.
The level of detail he provides is remarkable. The blue mist, the metallic tunnel, it's almost cinematic.
Right, and then he sees them. Small, skinny beings, large heads, black eyes, classic grays. But there's a twist. One taller gray figure, clearly in charge.
A hierarchy, a dominant figure, adds another layer of complexity to the typical abduction narrative, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely, and get this. The taller gray has a hand like a chicken foot. Long black claws.
A detail that's both disturbing and strangely specific. Why a chicken foot? What could it symbolize within Mutwa's understanding? It's a question that lingers.
It really does. And then the pain starts. Excruciating pain in his leg. He sees one of the smaller grays jabbing him with this metallic, pencil-shaped object, connected to a cable. Nightmare fuel.
Medical experimentation, a common thread in these stories. But Mutwa's account is so visceral, so agonizing.
Then they shove something up his nose, so far up he feels like it's in his brain. He passes out from the pain, wakes up vomiting blood, thinks he's dying. Then one of the grays brings this buzzing, drill-like device towards his face, and suddenly The pain's gone.
It's this strange juxtaposition of advanced technology and what seems like crude, almost primitive methods.
Right. And then it gets even weirder. Mutwa, understandably terrified, loses control of his bladder. His urine spills onto one of the grays, and the gray reacts as if it's been electrocuted.
A bizarre detail, it raises questions about the nature of these beings, their vulnerabilities.
Yeah. And then they wheel him into another room, a massive transparent cylinder filled with pink liquid. And floating in this liquid, more grays.
Incubation. It's a surreal image, almost primordial.
Now remember, Mutwa claimed to have eaten gray alien meat before, so he knew what they looked like under their suits. He described their real bodies as grayish, reptilian veins close to the surface, allowing them to absorb oxygen from the air.
Like fragile amphibian creatures hiding inside those tough outer shells.
Exactly. After the gray incubation chamber, they take him to a large room filled with other humans, men and women, black and white. He gets wheeled close to one man, gets a good look, and poof, blacks out again.
What is the purpose of these other abductees? Are they being studied, experimented on, bred?
So many questions. Anyway, he wakes up back in the forest, missing his pants and shoes, legs still wounded, covered in this awful metallic odor.
The lingering physical effects, the smell, the wound, it grounds his story in a reality that's hard to dismiss.
He stumbles down the mountain, runs into some young people who help him back to his village. But they keep their distance. Because of the smell, he later learns.
Imagine that feeling, returning to your community transformed, carrying the stench of something unknown.
And when he gets back to the village, all the dogs go crazy, barking and snarling at him. His teacher, the one he'd been studying with, takes one look at him and says, "I know where you've been."
Marked by the experience, changed on a fundamental level.
But was confused. Asks his teacher how he knows. And the teacher replies, "Don't play dumb, you were taken by the gods."
The gods. A loaded term,
Yeah.
implying power, authority, even reverence.
Right. But Mutwa's experience with these gods was anything but divine. He presses his teacher, wants to know who they are, and the teacher just says, "You're better off not knowing."
Classic warning against forbidden knowledge.
Now, this abduction happened in 1959. But a year earlier, something else happened that might be connected. A friend invited him over for dinner, promised him something good. Mutwa shows up, excited for a feast. His friend leads him and his wife to a dark pit in the backyard and offers him a piece of meat.
This is already giving off some unsettling vibes.
Right. Mutwa, he can't see in the darkness, pops the meat in his mouth and immediately regrets it. Describes it as awful, like chewing on a metal coin. His friend urges him to keep eating, assures him it's good for him.
That pressure to consume something so repulsive. What is the true nature of this gift?
Well, after that little snack, Mutwa, his friend, and his friend's wife all get violently ill, bedridden for days, near death. But his friend keeps repeating this weird mantra. If you can just survive this, you'll gain great benefits. You'll be changed.
A twisted initiation, perhaps. A trial by ordeal, but what is the true cost of this transformation?
And here's the kicker. Mutwa says he did change. His senses sharpened, his awareness heightened. Felt like he gained some psychic ability.
The story enters the realm of the metaphysical. Did he gain powers, or was it a psychological reaction to a traumatic experience?
Later, he gets sick again. His teacher comes to visit, thinks Mutwa's on his deathbed, asks him for a favor.
This is where things take a dark turn.
The teacher says, "If you die, can I eat you?"
Cannibalism. A taboo so deeply ingrained in our psyche. Yet here, it's presented within this context of spiritual practice.
Mutwa is understandably freaked out, asks why his teacher would even want to do that. And the teacher says, "Because you've eaten the flesh of the gods."
It casts a whole new light on that earlier incident, doesn't it?
It definitely does.
A meal to remember, or perhaps one better left forgotten.
So Mutwa decides to get out of Dodge. Can't deal with the weird vibes, the dogs acting crazy, the whole becoming dinner thing.
I can't say I blame him, but it's clear the experience left its mark, fueled his obsession with uncovering the truth about these Chitauris.
Oh, yeah. He travels all over Africa, interviewing anyone who claimed to have had similar encounters, collects over 200 accounts, men, women, black, white, everyone saying they'd seen these beings.
A widespread phenomenon then, not just isolated incidents, makes you wonder.
One of the people he interviews is this woman, Elizabeth Clarer, a white South African, used to work for British intelligence. She tells Mutwa she was abducted by the Greys and, wait for it, impregnated.
Alien-human hybridization, a classic trope. taps into our anxieties about genetic manipulation, the blurring of species boundaries.
Yeah, the whole "are we alone" question takes on a whole new meaning. Anyway, Claire claimed the Greys told her they were from a planet called Meatonton. No word on whether they sent an intergalactic baby shower invite, though.
A planet with a name. It almost makes it sound, well, plausible.
Right. But for Mutwa, his own abduction continued to haunt him. Why him? What do they do to him? But years later, things start to make a strange kind of sense.
The psychological impact of such events, the lingering trauma, the struggle to integrate the inexplicable into one's identity.
Exactly. He realizes that after the abduction, he developed skills he never had before, became a talented sculptor, even though he'd never worked with clay in his life.
A sudden surge of creativity. We see this in accounts of mystical experiences throughout history.
And it wasn't just art. He claimed to have knowledge of engineering, weapons design, blueprints for building a fighter jet, all this stuff just popping into his head, fully formed.
Like unlocking hidden potential, accessing a vast reservoir of knowledge.
But there's a dark side to it, too. Mutwa started feeling like his mind wasn't entirely his own. Strange thoughts, images he'd never seen before, felt controlled, like a puppet.
A fear of mental manipulation, the loss of control over one's thoughts, a very real anxiety in our technological age.
And it wasn't just mental, according to Mutwa. He claimed that after the abduction, he became intersex, developed both male and female characteristics.
A profound physical transformation, a blurring of boundaries that echoes the blurring of his mental and spiritual boundaries.
He came to believe that these Chitauris, despite being referred to as gods in Zulu mythology, weren't benevolent at all. Described them as a species that could interbreed with humans, hiding among us, manipulating us for their own goals.
A far cry from the traditional image of divine protectors.
He pointed to Zulu legends about a war between humans and the Chitauri. If they were truly gods, why the war? Why would humans need to fight them?
A valid point. The idea of gods warring with humanity is a common thread in mythology.
He even claimed that the Chitauri feed on human brainwaves. Only specific frequencies, though. They get an energy boost when we're in certain mental states. He even speculated that this is why some people live longer than others. Their brainwaves are more nutritious to the Chitauri.
Humans as an energy source. It reflects our anxieties about exploitation, being used and discarded by forces beyond our control.
And get this. He claimed the reason we haven't achieved world peace is because the Chitauri keep us divided. They benefit from our conflict, our wars. We're pawns in their cosmic game.
The idea that we're being manipulated by unseen forces, it resonates with those who distrust authority, who question the official narrative.
So how do they exert so much control? Mutwa believe it's through interbreeding. They create hybrid offspring, infiltrating human society. He even suggested that many royal families throughout history are descended from these hybrids.
Conspiracy theories about hidden lineages, a lack of transparency in power structures, it plays into those deep-seated suspicions.
He said that after that ancient war, the Chitauri retreated underground. They're still here, though, lurking beneath the surface, pulling strings from the shadows.
Hidden subterranean civilizations secretly influencing events, a concept that's fascinated people for centuries.
Oh, and remember how Mutwa's teacher wanted to eat him because he'd eaten gray meat? Well, turns out that wasn't his first encounter with unusual cuisine.
Oh, this should be good.
Back in 1958, while he was studying to become a shaman, a friend invited him over for dinner. They go out to this dark pit in the backyard, and his friend gives him a piece of meat, tells him it's good for him. Sounds familiar, right?
It does echo that previous incident.
Yeah. In the darkness, Mutwa couldn't see what he was eating. But afterwards, he got really sick, almost died. And guess what? So did his friend and his friend's wife.
Probably not food poisoning then.
Years later, while researching the Chitauri, he comes across these accounts from people who claim to have hunted and eaten greys. Describe the meat as metallic, tough, and, well, it made them sick.
So Mutwa unknowingly consumed gray alien flesh before his abduction.
And then it hits him. The meat he ate back in 1958 was grey meat. He'd eaten part of an extraterrestrial being, and it changed him.
A horrifying realization.
Now, I know all this sounds crazy, but Mutwa was adamant that people shouldn't just dismiss it. He said even if you don't believe it, don't deny it. Because denial, he argued, plays into the Chitauri's hands.
An interesting thought. Does refusing to acknowledge something give it power?
He used this analogy. Saw a graffiti tag that said, "There's no mafia in America. Anyone who says there is, we'll kill them." He said it perfectly illustrated his point. Denial is the ultimate form of control.
A chilling thought. Those in power often benefit from our ignorance, our unwillingness to question.
Mutwa claimed the Chitauri are masters of deception, shapeshifters, appearing human while hiding their true reptilian nature. Said humans have this cognitive interface that filters our perception, prevents us from seeing their true form.
A cognitive filter limiting what we can perceive. The idea that there might be entire realms of existence hidden from our view.
He said only shamans, through years of training and ritual practice, can bypass this filter and see the Chitauri for what they really are.
A deeper level of reality, accessible only to those who have honed their perception.
And here's another weird thing. He said the Chitauris have this strange weakness, a specific type of African hardwood, incredibly toxic to them.
An interesting vulnerability for such an advanced race.
Mutwa said this wood was once plentiful in Africa, but the Chitauri made sure it was all cut down. Now, only a few shamanic artifacts made from this wood remain.
Relics of a forgotten war.
And one last thing. Mutwa was a Zulu shaman, right? Well, guess what Zulu means in their language?
I'm all ears.
It means sky and travel. Mutwa interpreted this as interstellar travel. Like the name of his tribe hinted at a connection to the stars.
A connection encoded in language itself, it certainly makes you think, almost like we're missing some crucial piece of the puzzle hidden right there in the name.
Yeah, exactly. So where do we go from here? What are we supposed to make of all this? Mutwa never backed down from his story. Kept giving interviews, adding more details, this whole hidden war between humans and the Chitauri.
He was certainly persistent and passionate about preserving ancient knowledge. Don't dismiss those traditions, he'd say. They hold clues.
Clues to what? Our true past. Some hidden force shaping our world.
Perhaps a reminder to look beyond our modern worldview. Acknowledge the possibility of something more.
And he insisted it wasn't just the Chitauri. Other extraterrestrial races out there too. Some good, some bad, all vying for influence.
A multidimensional universe. Beings with motivations we can barely comprehend.
Like some intergalactic Game of Thrones.
An apt comparison. Maybe the real battle isn't for land or resources, but for control of the narrative itself.
Control of the story we tell ourselves about reality. Mutwa passed away in 2020, age 98. Left behind quite a legacy. Art, storytelling, ideas that make you think.
His work certainly pushes boundaries, reminds us that the human imagination, well, it has no limits, and our search for meaning, for understanding our place in all of this.
It's a journey, never ending. So what do we make of it all? Are we just batteries for reptilian overlords? Secret war for our souls happening right now?
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I'm looking at those guys in suits a little differently now.
Maybe the biggest takeaway is the importance of skepticism. Question the narrative. Don't be afraid to look beyond the surface. The universe might be far stranger, far more wondrous than we ever imagined.
Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into Credo Mutwa's extraordinary claims. Until next time, folks, keep those eyes on the skies and maybe watch out for anyone who looks a little too silly.